Hi everybody. So first off, I suck with anything that has to do with technology. You guys know this. You've seen me in the classroom fighting that stupid smartboard. So I don't know how to edit videos. So this is gonna be what it is. I'm happy to see you guys, even though I'm not actually seeing you. This is some kind of way that I thought it would be better for us to connect, is if I can make videos and then you don't have to do as much kind of boring reading. Sorry if there's like a glare in my glasses too. I can see it. I don't know how to fix it. What you're seeing is my computer screen. I'm sitting in my grandmother's house. Behind me, this is I don't know what this is. It's some kind of painting. There's like a baby there, and this lady is sewing, I think, and this little girl is playing with a baby doll. Um, just my grandmother's decor. She's had it for as long as I can remember. So, um, yeah. So this is not an ideal situation for any of us, but we're gonna try to make the best of it. And I really miss you guys. I really, really do. I was very upset whenever I heard that we're moving online for the rest of the semester. I mean, I think it's a great idea because we need social distancing right now in order to combat COVID-19. But I was also really upset because I wouldn't get to see you guys face to face for the rest of the semester. Essentially, what I will be doing for the rest of the semester is making videos and hoping you guys enjoy them, reading the novels along with you. We have Mama Day, and then we just have 2 novels after that. What else will I be doing? Working on my dissertation, struggling to run outside. Running outside is the worst thing in all of existence. I really, really hate it. But I can't go to a gym and run right now. So outside in the great outdoors, it is. I really hate it. I'm really struggling, you guys. That's like been the worst thing for me so far, is the running outside. How pathetic. Yeah, and I am just going to be hunkered in this house, my grandmother's house, with her for the duration, because, as I've told you guys, she's immunosuppressed. So we want to make sure that she has as little contact with the outside world as possible, and that means that I have to have as little contact with the outside world as possible. So it's going to be interesting for all of us. I hope you're all staying safe, that you're all staying healthy, that you're all washing your hands. Try to eat healthy at this time. Try to do exercise. You can go outside and like go for a run, or, goof around in your yard or something. You just need to make sure that you're maintaining distance from people while you're doing those things. So for example, whenever I was going for a run last night, there was I was doing my cool down walk, and there was a woman coming toward me on the same side of the road, and she moved over. Just a social distancing thing. Either that, or she took one look at me and was like, holy cow, that woman sounds like a winded rhinoceros. I don't want to be anywhere near her. Which is also a possibility. I don't know why running outside makes me so winded, but it does. We're 3.5 minutes into this video. Let's get down to it. If you see me looking down, I have notes that I'm reading off of. So make sure that you subscribe to our Slack and our YouTube channel. The Slack channel is so that we can communicate, we can all just stay in touch with each other, but also so that if you want to get in contact with me, immediately you can do so. Because I have the Slack app on my phone, and I will get notifications whenever you message me. And then, yeah, our YouTube channel, I uploaded a very short clip of the cats this morning that I hope you guys will enjoy. So make sure that you check that out too. Okay, so as far as presentations and guided reading questions are concerned, they are now due midnight on the night listed on the syllabus. So, for example, who has one coming up? Wait a minute. I think, Julia, you're presenting on ecofeminism next. That's going to be our next presentation. That's due on Tuesday. So Julia's presentation would usually be due by 10:30 on Tuesday, but because of online and I have to make sure that I get all the material up for you guys on time, Julia, your presentation is due to me Monday by midnight. Right, so it's midnight the day before it's listed on the syllabus. Does that make sense? If you have questions, people can email me. It's totally fine. I will try to be as responsive to email as I can right now. Okay. And before we actually get into talking about Mama Day, I want to well, I guess we're still talking about Mama Day. I want to highlight a couple of your responses from last class that I had you guys do that kind of analysis of that passage, and I just want to highlight a couple student responses. I was really impressed with you guys. You were all so sweet and polite to one another too. It was really good. But there were a couple of people that analyzed the passage, and I was like, yes, yes. Okay, so let me read those off for you guys. And if I look like I'm like making crazy faces, it's because I'm looking at the other side of my computer while I'm reading these, so wish me luck. Okay, I'm gonna make this smaller. Okay, there we go. So first up is Natalie. Here's what she had to say about that passage where Mama Day is feeding I believe it's choke cherry bark to Bernice, because Bernice was an idiot and decided to take some kind of like fertility pills, and she just hadn't listened to Mama Day's advice. So here's what Natalie had to say. The use of natural remedies may be seen as the magic. However, I think the genuine motherly care that Mama Day presents in Beatrice's time of need is the real magic. Nicely said. The effect of human connection and compassion cannot be overlooked. It holds a power like none other. A mother's kiss has the power to take pain away. She wants to not only help Beatrice with her fertility issues, but go on to protect her from the unknown chemicals and biological effects that could be sustained by taking the fertility medication. Her magic is the care that she gives to others. Yes, I love that last line, especially her magic is the care that she gives to others. Mama Day's magic, most of it, as we may have noticed so far, is about her kind of being a motherly figure, using the natural world, really connecting with it in order to take care of those around her, to help them out. She is usually, in particular, someone who helps whenever you're sick, or she's kind of been a midwife to multiple different people too. So that's that kind of care that I think Natalie is really channeling there and doing so really well. I also want to know what Angelina had to say. Here's what she said. Throughout this passage, it is very apparent the kind of pain Bernice is going through to be a mother, and how her desire to be a mother is allowing her to deal with this pain. In relation to motherhood, Mama is making every attempt, meaning Mama Day is making every attempt to help Bernice as if her instincts are kicking in, as a mother would. She seems to be very caring in the attempt to help Bernice magically, because that is what she knows best. Therefore, we can interpret she is doing everything she can to help Bernice as a mother would help her child. After reading this passage, we can also infer that motherhood is not easy. It is a commitment to something and is constant work. Nicely said. In the same sense, Mama Day acts as a mother to the community, and she is always striving to help and will put herself aside at times for others like a mother would for her child. Yes. So what Angelina is kind of noting here is that Mama Day is really living up to the mama part of her name, right? She is kind of like Saphira Wade at this moment, who we discussed is a mirror for both Mama Day and Coco, acting as a kind of mother to the inhabitants of the entire island. There's like a fuzz on my nose, so like excuse me for a second. Holy smokes. I just lost my train of thought. Okay. And she's also specifically acting kind of like a mother would to Bernice at this moment, right? She kind of like lifts her up, and she gives her like this little sweet, and then she gives her like the medicine, and then she gives her the sweet again. She like rubs Bernice's neck. If you think about the kind of care that a mother might give to a child, which Angelina gestured toward, that's exactly what is happening in this passage. And then we have a comment from Isaiah, who is the last one I want to highlight. So he said, in this passage, the motherhood that Miranda, or Mama Day, displays is almost the same as if a mother were taking care of her child. Exactly, right? The trauma that she experienced from the passing of her family members is shown through her compassion and caring ways. Her ability to make Bernice feel at ease shows the growth that she gained through her traumatic experiences. She is showing others the love that she never really got to experience. Her ability to be a strong figure is a part of the magic that she has. Yes, I love how you're tying this, Isaiah, to the lessons that Mama Day learned from her childhood. She, remember, so her younger sister Peace died very, very young, and then that resulted in her mother committing suicide. And the text is a little bit cagey about this for us at times, but we kind of start to realize what's going on here. Yeah, and so that has really shaped, right, the way in which Mama Day acts and how she cares for the society. We saw that her father, John Paul, started to call her Little Mama really early on in her life, and it's because she started to gain those nurturing qualities. As the eldest sister, she probably also helped to take care of Abigail a lot. Okay, so those were the highlighted student comments. Thank you guys so much. Again, you did a great job. So for today, you had to read a lot of the novel because we're trying to fit 2 classes into this one class because Tuesday's class was canceled. Just as an FYI, I'm filming this on Wednesday. So I want to highlight some key summary points. Also, however, if you go onto our Blackboard site and you click on the folder that has our online lesson in it for today, there's a more detailed summary there, but I just want to kind of hit some of the highlights for you guys. Okay, George and Coco marry after 6 months and fighting a lot. Oh, okay. Live your life. Okay. Mama Day helps Bernice conceive. That is a kind of creepy moment in the text. I'm going to read that passage out loud. I will talk at you about it. We'll talk about it. Okay. Ruby also marries Junior Lee, and we see that she is an extremely jealous wife. She apparently uses dark magic against any women that she thinks are going to take Junior Lee away from her. This becomes really important in the latter half of the text. Okay. And then we have a time skip 4 years in the future. So George and Coco have been married for 4 years, but George, because of work and his addiction to football, I think, I don't know when the football season begins. He's never been able to go to Willow Springs with Coco whenever she has gone back to visit her grandmother Abigail and her great aunt Mama Day. And finally, after 4 years of marriage, George is like, I'm going with you. And that is part 2 of the novel. We also see Bernice's son, who is nicknamed Chick, or Little Caesar. The nickname Chick is a little too on the nose, and it kind of makes Bernice upset. She's also like a really protective mother. She goes a little overboard. Like the novel is continuously like, girl needs to chill. Ruby is more jealous than ever, and we start to see this partially in the fact that Coco was supposed to go out and hang out with like Ambush and Dr. Buzzard, and Junior Lee came along. This happened earlier in the novel. And then like Ruby shows up and is like looking over the fence, and Mama Day's like, she's in the house. Ruby, goodbye. So Ruby is kind of had some suspicions about Coco. We know those suspicions are unfounded. Coco is just way too in love with George, or wrapped up in him at least, to even care about Junior Lee. Also, Junior Lee seems like one of those men that you would say your friend found at the local dumpster. That's what he seems like. Okay. So, again, Coco and George go to Willow Springs at last, and George and Coco have a huge fight the night before her grandmother and great aunt are kind of throwing this party so everybody can come and actually meet George, everybody on the island, that is. And they have this huge kind of violent fight. And Coco gets upset during the party, and she goes out onto the back porch and she sits down on the steps, and Junior Lee comes out and he's like trying to sweet talk her. He actually like pulls open part of her top too, which is kind of sexual harassment. And she flees, and then it's so eerie, like Ruby is just like off in the distance like watching, because I guess that's what she does. Like, you couldn't just go into the party and have a drink and have fun. No, you had to creepily hang out in the backyard and watch what your husband was doing. And Junior Lee's like, oh, She lured me out here, baby. And like Ruby is just silently staring, like, it's really creepy. It's meant to be creepy. And then there's a big storm, a huge hurricane hits. So those are kind of some of the highlights that happened in this section of the novel. Where do we want to go now? I want to talk to you guys about some analysis of the text. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to point you to specific passages. I'm going to try to read out loud after I take a drink. Excuse me. Okay. Okay. I'm going to point you to specific passages. I recommend that you turn in your own copy of the book, whether that's electronic or a physical copy like I have, and you kind of look at those passages too as I'm reading them to you. And I'm going to go in a linear kind of manner through the novel. So I actually want to start with, this is right after George and Coco have gotten married, and Coco has told her grandmother and her great aunt, like, hey, I got married. Can you just imagine? Okay, whatever, Coco. Girl, make your own decisions, live your best life, I guess. And Mama Day and Abigail have decided that what they're going to actually do is make a quilt as a kind of wedding present for Coco, or rather, Coco has demanded a quilt, and they're like, fine, we'll do it. Mama Day complains about it quite a lot, and Abigail is just down for anything because she's a sweet little old lady. So let's look at pages 137 through 138, which I am also turning to right now. Okay. So I'm going to start in the middle of this paragraph on page 137, and I'm just going to read for a little while. If I start to cough, it's because my throat is dry and I need more water. Okay, so whenever they're making this, this is what Mama Day is kind of weaving into the quilt. A bit of her daddy's Sunday shirt is matched with Abigail's lace slip, the collar from Hope's graduation dress, the palm of Grace's baptismal gloves. Trunks and boxes from the other place gave up enough for 20 quilts, corduroy from her uncle's, broadcloth from her great-uncle's. Her needle fastens the satin trim of Peace's receiving blanket to Coco's baby jumper, to a pocket from her own gardening apron. Golds into oranges, into reds, into blues. She concentrates on the tiny stitches as the clock ticks away. The front of Mother's gingham shirtwaist. It would go right nice into the curve between those two little patches of apricot toweling, but Abigail would have a fit. Maybe she won't remember, and maybe the sun won't come up tomorrow either. I'll just use a sliver, no longer than the joint of my thumb. Put a little piece of her in here somewhere. What's really interesting about this quilt is that whenever these women are making it, they're not using new materials that they went out and they bought from Joann Fabrics. They're actually using scraps of old cloth from things like blankets and clothes and curtains and stuff like that that belonged to past family members. And whenever they're making the quilt, they're actually kind of weaving them into one another in like loops. If any of you have ever done anything like crocheting or sewing or knitting or whatever, you'll have a kind of better image of how that kind of looping works. I personally have never done it myself, but whatever, I've seen a lot of people do it. And so they're actually weaving various parts of the past together. And this is going to be a gift for George and Coco. So George and Coco are going to have a gift that is kind of this compilation of this complex Day family history. And it's this really physical object that marries all of those different family members together. Just as George and Coco have gotten married, so this quilt is a marriage too of different individuals, different times that these individuals have been alive. And I want to continue. The gingham is almost dry rot and don't cut well, the threads fraying under her scissors. She tries and tries again for just a sliver. Too precious to lose, have to back it with something. Rummaging through the oranges, she digs up a piece of faded homespun, no larger than the palm of her hand and still tight and sturdy. Now, this is real old. Much older than the gingham. Could have been part of anything, but only a woman would wear this color. The homespun is wrapped over and basted along the edges of the gingham. She can shape the curve she needs now. Extra slow, careful with this one. She pushes the needle through, tugs the thread up, 2 ticks of the clock. Pushes the needle through, tugs the thread down, 2 ticks of the clock. She ain't bringing that boy home mid-August. These italicized parts in this passage are like Mama Day's interior thoughts. And she's kind of getting those kind of prophetic notions while she's doing this kind of weaving. Miranda feels a chill move through the center of her chest. She doesn't want to know, so she pushes the needle through and tugs the thread down, tugs the thread up, or the next August either. She tries to put her mind somewhere else, but she only has the homespun, the gingham, and the silver flashing of her needle, or the next. It doesn't help to listen to the clock, because it's only telling her what she knew about the homespun all along. The woman who wore it broke a man's heart. Candlewalk night. What really happened between her great-grandmother and Bascombe Wade? How many, if any, of them 7 sons were his? But the last boy to show up in their family was no mystery. He had cherished another woman who could not find peace. Ophelia. So what we actually realize is that Mama Day has discovered part of a dress that belonged to none other than Saphira Wade that has been passed down through the family and is now being woven into this quilt as well. So you have this origin, this great mother figure, right, of the whole island being woven by a reflection of Saphira for another reflection of Saphira. So we can trace, it's this really interesting kind of matriarchal lineage that flows through the text, this kind of power that works through the day women in the novel. And it also is a kind of record of their family trauma as well. Okay, I want to look at page 147 about the quilt too. So let's just jump ahead to that. Okay, this is after Coco and George have actually received the quilt in the mail from Mama Day and Abigail. Right at the top of 147. Like, I'm starting, oh, Jesus Christ. I can't edit out my swearing in this, guys, so you just have to put up with it. Anyway, I'm starting right up here. Okay. And then our wedding present came from home in the same summer. After I unfolded the quilt, this is from Coco's perspective. After I unfolded the quilt, all 7 square feet of it, we stood there in awe for a moment. You, meaning George, wanted to clear a wall in the living room and hang it up, but it had been made to be used, and I also knew they hadn't gone through that kind of labor just for me. I ran my hands along the multicolored rings. They had sewed for my grandchildren to be conceived under this quilt. I looked at you standing beside me. The blue cotton shirt as always, hair cropped short and parted to the left as always. Our grandchildren? Let's see how it fits on the bed, I said. Well, we know what they went off to do. Let's see how it fits on the bed, George. But what Coco realizes is that this quilt wasn't even necessarily made for her and George. It contains such a depth and wellspring of family history that it is meant to outlast Coco and George and be passed on to her, well, their children, and that it is actually meant for her grandchildren to be conceived under. So this is an object that contains a lot of family history and is meant to soak up more too. History is obviously really, really important in this novel, the ability to trace your own history, to know where you came from. And if we think about the larger context of African American experience in the United States, we know that that hasn't actually always been the case for African Americans, because whenever their ancestors were brought to this country, they were often forcibly separated, or there were some other factors going in too, such as like rapes by plantation owners or other white men involved in the plantation, that kind of leads to a confused lineage, right? That is a kind of trauma wherein you can't actually trace your roots. So for example, me as a white person, I can go back and I can trace my roots to I can trace them to England, Ireland, Scotland, Italy, Germany, but that's not always the case necessarily for those who are the descendants of slaves. And so it's kind of a unique aspect that Coco and her family, the Day family, are actually able to do this, and how important that becomes, even if it's a traumatic past and is in part a slave past, to understanding all three, the past, present, and the future. I hope that made sense. I feel like that part was a ramble. Let's also talk about Bernice's pregnancy ritual, which is really interesting. That's on pages 139 through 140. Okay. Oh boy. Here we go. The first new moon comes spring. So this is from Mama Day's perspective. Mama Day, so she can hear her coming, smell her coming, long before she makes that turn down by the old pine stump, moving through the bush, guided by the starlight that glints off the two pairs of eyes waiting and rocking, both unblinking. So there's like Mama Day's pair of eyes, and then there's another pair of eyes. Don't go dark, computer. One pair cradled low in the lap of the other, soft rumbles vibrating its feathered throat. So she's holding a chicken in her lap. One pair humming a music born before words as they rock and stroke, forefinger and thumb, gently following the path of feathers, throat, breast, and sides. The right hand stroking, the left hand cupping underneath the tiny egg hole that sucks itself open and closed, open and closed. So in other words, Mama Day is like stroking the chicken with one hand to keep it calm, and she has her like other hand cradled under the chicken where it would lay an egg. And she's just waiting for it to lay an egg into her very palm. Two pairs of eyes breathing as one when hope rounds that bend. She can taste the fear that hesitates on the edge of the garden walk. It's thick in the air, moving before the feet passing by the tube roses, the camellias, the hanging vines by the dwarf honeysuckle, feet passing into the other place where flowers can be made to sing and trees to fly. Fear trembling at the bottom of the porch steps. So this is Bernice now. Fear trembling at the bottom of the porch steps, watching the gleaming of two pair of eyes, hearing the creak of wood against wood under the soft rumbling from feathers, the humming begun in eternity. But it's hope that finds a voice. Mama Day? Mama Day? The right hand strokes, the left hand reaches out, the palm wet from the cradled egg, gray and warm. So the chicken is actually like laid an egg in Mama Day's palm. Confusion waits a bit too long. So Bernice is kind of like, what am I supposed to do with that thing? The shell dries and grows cold under the hidden moon. One pair of eyes unblinking, one pair frowns and smashes the egg onto the porch step. Silent, Bernice, she pleads for another chance, but she must wait and listen. Not to the humming, not to the creak of wood against wood. Nah, the moon inching toward the horizon. The tiny hole sucking itself open and closed, open and closed. The left hand reaches back out. Knowing takes the egg while the shell, still pulsing and wet, breaks it open, eats it. So let's pause for a second here. What's really interesting is that you have multiple images of fertility in this passage so far. And the ones I particularly want to highlight are the moon, which is supposed to be a first new moon come spring, right? So the moon is often associated in classical thought with Artemis, if we're talking Greek, Diana, if we're talking Roman. She is the goddess of the hunt, the virgin goddess, a symbol of womanhood. But the moon is also, too, a sign of fertility in a lot of cultures. And the egg itself, right, we could talk about as a kind of symbol of fertility. And Bernice, who has had trouble getting pregnant, so trouble with fertility, actually under this symbol of fertility, the moon, breaks open another symbol of fertility, the egg, and eats it. So it's like she is ingesting the possibility of fertility into her body. And now things are going to get really interesting. Now, it only takes a nod of the head to move them all inside. Pine chips smoking on the fire, blazing in the parlor hearth, makes the air steamy and sweet. Every shadow in the unlit room is dancing along the floor and walls. She ain't got to be told why the dining table is covered in a white sheet and has padded boards nailed upright on one end. She strips down naked, rests her head on the embroidered pillow, and props her feet high into the scooped top of each board. It'll be easier if she closes her eyes. In the morning, she can tell herself it was all a dream. And it can't be human hands, no way, making her body feel like this. 9 opening. She breathes through 2, meaning her nose, hears through 2, eats through 1, the 2 below her waist, and 2 for the life she longs to nurse, meaning her breasts. 9 openings melting into the unaccountable, because the touch is light, light, spreading each tiny pore on each inch of skin. If she could scream, she would, as the touching begins deeper at the points of her fingertips to expand the pores that let in air, caressing down the bones of each finger joint to the ones that join the palm, the wrist, the lower arms, her shoulders, sides, and stomach made into something more liquid than water, her breasts and hips flowing up against the pool of the earth. She ain't flesh, she's a center between the thighs, spreading wide to take her in. The touch of feathers, space to space, ancient fingers keeping each in line. The unaccountable, the unthinkable is one opening, pulsing and alive, wet. The egg moves from one space to the other. A rhythm older than woman draws it in and holds it tight. This is a really interesting passage because first off, you might have kind of been like, what is even happening here? It's a kind of fertility ritual. There's something very sexual about it and kind of queer about it in that this is a fertility ritual that doesn't involve Bernice's husband Ambush. It involves Mama Day, a chicken, and Bernice. And Bernice kind of is like, there's something kind of sexual happening to her. It's kind of orgasmic. It's like Mama Day is touching her. The chicken is touching her. It's like all three of them kind of work together to actually move that egg that Bernice has ingested from the chicken and actually turn it into an egg in her female reproductive parts. And again, it kind of has this queer orgasmic component to it as well. This is not heterosexuality on display here. This is something other, right? And so it makes sense too that this kind of magic would occur at the other place. All right. I want to skip ahead quite a bit. I want to go to the part where George hears the legend of Saphira Wade from his wife, Coco. So let's go to page 218. And I want to note, you guys, that I am not doing as much analysis necessarily as I think that we would have gotten in class. I am just kind of hitting some of the passages that I thought were most interesting or important. There may be other passages that you were interested in. Just because I didn't cover those doesn't mean that they're not relevant. I mean, I could do a close reading of every single line, word, page of this book, but that would take forever. So, and I don't want to make you guys sit through a video that's terribly long. This video is going to be long enough as it is. Okay, so page 218, this is like the bottom third of that big paragraph that's on page 218. And this is from George's perspective. And he says, Bascombe Wade Stone had been marked 1788 through 1823. Who exactly was he? And then we don't hear exactly what Coco said, but George kind of gives us the gist. So she says to him, and he says, well, I got the same legend. And then she says, the unnamed slave woman, the deeds to Willow Spring, the vigil by the ocean bluff, except that you told me that woman had been your grandmother's great-grandmother. But it was odd the way you said it. She was the great-great-grandmother, mother capitalized there, as if you were listing the attributes of a goddess. The whole thing was so intriguing, I wondered if that woman had lived at all. Places like this island were ripe for myths, but if she had really existed, there must be some record. Maybe in Bascombe Wade's papers, deeds of sale for his slaves. Where had his home been on this island? Did he have a family? Who erected his tombstone? So this is really interesting. Coco is kind of trying to convey to George the kind of mythical past of her own lineage and the history of the island, and he, being the human that he is, because he kind of doubts and misreads and doesn't fully see all the magic that's happening and taking place around him on the island, he gets very like clinical and analytic and says, I wonder if I can find records for Saphira Wade. It's like, no, the record is actually standing in front of you in the very form of Coco, who is her actual descendant. That is all the proof that you need. And it's really interesting that he notices too that Coco speaks of Saphira Wade as if she is a goddess, right? So if you think about the kind of biblical story of Genesis, if you're familiar at all with that, this has been brought up multiple times in the text too, that God creates the earth and humans and everything on it in 6 days. On the seventh day he rests. That Saphira Wade had 7 sons, and then she was like, whew, I'm resting, I'm done. Right? She kind of acts, and I think we discussed this during our last in-person class meeting. She acts as this kind of godlike figure for the entire island here. She is a kind of goddess figure, and it makes sense then that her family lineage, the Days, someone like Mama Day, because Saphira had magic, that magic would kind of flow down through their bloodstream too. Okay. And now I want to talk about whenever Ophelia, or Coco, takes George actually out to the other place. There's something interesting that happens there. They kind of get into like a little tiff, and George is like, ooh, she's just in one of her moods. But then we actually see Coco's perspective, and we see what was happening for her whenever they were walking past the old house, through the garden, and out to where you can see the water beyond the other place. And this is on page 224, and it's that final big paragraph before the break. So she says, wonderful stories that fed a child's imagination through her eyes and ears. I saw those same flying petals now as our legs brushed a pair of zinnias and startled a group of scarlet butterflies. It was exactly what you said, an old house with a big garden. The oldest house in Willow Springs, the only house with 3 stories and a full veranda, a second-floor balcony, sloping dormers, and bay windows. Too old to have been built by even my great-grandfather, but he played on those veranda steps, and later he climbed them with his new bride, Ophelia. What had Grandma said about her mother, an unhappy woman who never recovered from the loss of her youngest child? But Mama Day, in her no-nonsense fashion, had gone right to the bone. Crazy as a bedbug, and she died without peace. Yes, just an old house with a rocking chair on the porch. A hand-carved rocking chair that was moving ever so slightly in the breeze from the sound. Its rounded slats creaking relentlessly against the wooden planks. Why couldn't you hear it? Over and over. You'll break his heart. You wanted to sit in the rocking chair and play Southern gentleman with me on your lap. I wanted us to get out of there. I couldn't stand it anymore. We actually see that Coco has a kind of magic to her too, a kind of connection to the space and place in the natural world that is on Willow Springs. Whenever she is walking through it, she actually hears all these voices that are kind of prophesizing to her that she's going to break George's heart. And that's kind of what gets her so anxious and upset. And why George says she's in one of her moods. All right, George, whatever. He's also the one who started reading books on menstruation after he married her to understand what it's like to live with a woman, and George, you're an idiot. That's all I have to say. What's really interesting is that the natural world is prophesizing to Coco in the same way that we have seen it done multiple times throughout the novel with Mama Day. Again, we have another reflection of Saphira Wade, Mama Day, Coco, right? They all kind of mirror each other. They collapse into one figure for us. And this is kind of scary too, because we know that these kind of premonitions that the Day women get actually come true, that somehow Coco is going to break George's heart. We don't know exactly what that means yet at this point in the book. We were told earlier in the kind of introduction to the novel that she and George are no longer married, that she left Willow Springs after this summer, but that he stayed. So it's possible that what it means is that they get divorced. I'm not going to tell you if that's the case yet. I don't want to spoil the ending. The ending is really, really powerful. Okay, and then I want to talk about Coco's complexion again. We spoke about this a little bit before, how she is a very, very, very light-skinned black woman. So let's go ahead and look at pages 232 through 233. And this is part of the problem behind the fight that George and Coco have before the party that Mama Day and Abigail throw for them. I feel like I've been talking nonstop for so long and that I sound like a smoker. Remember to hydrate. Okay. So I'm starting at the bottom of page 232, and I'm just going to read to the end of that first paragraph on 233, and then I'll talk about it a little bit. This is from Cocos' perspective. Our worst fight ever, and it was all your fault. You knew how nervous I was about that night, and not a bit of sympathy. That's because you never remembered anything important I told you. No one in Willow Springs thought that anyone would ever want to marry me, and half of them were coming just to make sure you were real. It had taken 4 years to get you down here, and each time I came home alone, it was the same doubt in their eyes. Who could possibly want the leper? It was awful growing up, looking the way I did, on an island of soft brown girls, or burnished ebony girls with their flashing teeth against that deep satin skin. Girls who could summon all the beauty of midnight by standing, arms akimbo, in the full sun. It was torture competing with girls like that. And if some brave soul wanted to take me out, they would tell him that I had some rare disease that was catching. It would have been worse if I hadn't been a Day. Everyone respected my family name, and Mama Day let it be known that anyone calling me anything that she didn't call me would have to tangle with her. Nobody wants to fight Mama Day. If they wanted to see a leper, she had ways to show them a real leper when they woke up one morning. I was treated very differently beyond the bridge. My physical features were an asset at times. But I was always distrustful of the black men who fawned over me. What was there about me that I should be so highly prized? Sure, I had grown up enough to accept myself, and no, I was hardly an ugly woman, but there had to be something a little twisted within them to think of me as a true beauty. So, in a lot of the African American community, and this is something that actually Uma brought up too about the Indian culture and Indian American community, not Native American, but Indian American from India, is that lighter skin is usually prized, right? And there are all these kind of whitening creams that are specifically targeted for women to lighten their complexions. And that's a form of white supremacy at work, right? This idea that people with lighter skin are more beautiful, they're better, they're superior, they're smarter, etc., etc., etc. None of that is true, right? We know that. But this still exists in society today, that that lighter black-skinned women are usually seen as more beautiful than women who are darker. On Willow Springs, it's the complete opposite. It's the dark girls who are usually prized as being really beautiful. And Coco, because she is so light complexioned, was actually on the island seen as less beautiful. So it's this interesting reversal, right, where it's this kind of inherent blackness that is seen as beautiful. And that might be because of the way that things turned out in 1823, whenever the slaves actually were given the deeds to the land of the island, and Bascom Wade died. So for Coco, and she notes this, beyond the bridge, so like in the rest of America, black men tended to be really attracted to her because she is lighter skinned. But in Willow Springs, while she was growing up, she was taught that she was less beautiful because she was lighter skinned. And she has kind of internalized that in the same way that a lot of darker skinned black women have internalized that they are somehow less beautiful because of their complexion, even if that's not true at all. This is a really interesting moment in the novel when, by using the opposite, Gloria Naylor is able to make this really, really interesting kind of comment and critique on the way that we judge African American women based off the color of their skin. So I want to point that out to you guys, because this Coco's complexion is a thread that kind of weaves itself throughout the novel. Okay, that's my analysis for the day. We're almost at 45 minutes and I want to end at 45, so I'm going to hurry through the rest of this. So your homework, finish reading the novel, please. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and I'm also afraid. Complete the discussion board assignments in our online lesson. In our reading folder, read the PDF Ecofeminism, and there's a link to the Encyclopedia Britannica that also talks about ecofeminism. And then, Julia, you're doing a presentation for us for next class. So remember, email your presentation to me by midnight on Monday, March 23rd, and you'll be all good to go. I hope you guys are doing well. I miss you all. I hope that was helpful. If you have questions, let me know. You guys can also contact me just to like chat if you need someone to talk to. I'm mostly just talking to the cats and my grandma right now, and some of my friends via social media, keeping up with them, making sure they're okay. But I would love to chat with you guys too. Please, like, send me memes, send me photos of your animals, really whatever you want. Go ahead and reach out. I'm super happy to talk to you guys. You're never bothering me. I hope you all stay safe and stay healthy, and that you are able to find something fun to do. All right, you guys. Bye.